This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
This is Resource Center on Enterprise, and I'm Lim Soon Heng. Last week, Dr. Raymond Madden, CEO of the Asian Institute of Finance, was here to talk about how to attract and retain talent. This week, he's sharing on how to mentor and coach them. While I believe these are specifically retention initiatives rather than developmental ones, they can be executed to keep talent because good mentoring and coaching engages an employee. Is that fair enough to say, Dr. Madden?
Oh, I think the engagement is key, Suning, in the sense of the fact that just think of people who've spent time with you to talk about your job, the type of role that you're doing, what you're doing in an organization, someone who gives you feedback on that, someone who relates to you on that. That's very, very powerful, and people really respond to that.
Before you go any further, what's the difference between mentoring and coaching?
Okay, the way I see it is simple. Coaching is something you largely do with very senior people and actually use externals because you want a very different sort of mindset. You're challenging people at their peak. Mentoring is something you do internally within the organization. Normally it's someone who obviously doesn't directly report to you, but somebody who may report to a peer or somebody in a related department. So you get a sparring partner, but you get someone who understands your organizational context, as we say.
So are the goals of mentoring and coaching different?
Well, they can be different, but they can be the same, because what you want is to take people and actually stretch them, deal with some of the ambiguities that they may face in their role, and make them think about their performance and ultimately perform better. And sometimes that's best done within an organization. You think of somebody who's more junior or a middle manager. Or if you're, on the board or a senior executive in an organization, you may want to do that by actually talking to people from outside the organization about some of the challenges that they face.
So mentors are internal, and coaches, if you're talking about the high level ones, coaches are external.
Yeah, that's the way I phrase it. That doesn't mean to say that mentors don't do coaching, because that's the whole notion of the type of conversation. But I think that mentors are normally internal and bring with them an organizational understanding that maybe you in a middle management role might not have. And that's the next step that you want to take people to.
So for an SME, should I be focusing on mentoring or coaching?
I think you should be doing both. And I know what your next question is going to be is, this is expensive. Where do I get the money to do this? Okay, so mentoring is internal. You get people in related areas, senior managers or middle managers, doing people one level below. Now, coaching, you can pay externally for that, but actually what you can do is you can go to your suppliers, to your customers, and see if you can have a different dialogue with them about the nature of the business. So you discuss the business in a very different way. People are very open to that. I mean, if you ring people up and say, can I take 20 minutes of your time to ask a question about the type of business we're running? People are normally very giving. So this is not about, forcing people to do this. I think when you ask people their opinion of things, they respond really well.
What strikes me is that it is as if mentoring is a longer process than coaching.
I would say it depends on the situation. Yes, because it's nice to have a mentor within an organization, someone you can go and talk to and chat about things maybe once a month. How are things going? What's going well for you? And what do you find really difficult within this organization? And, last time we talked about silo thinking. That can be a real challenge for people when they get stuck. And what they'd like to do is to sort of break that mold. Coaching often is on a particular issue and therefore is often short term. So, for example, when I've done coaching, I do it for 6 sessions because you want to create a dynamic that's new and fresh and independent, but you don't want to create a sort of dependency on someone coming to you once a month and saying, okay, what are your challenges? And that should be done really by you and your organization. So senior people should have mentors and mentees, someone they look after, and maybe an external coach.
I've always hated that word mentee. It kind of reminds me of some kind of an animal.
Or even a mint. But mentee is somebody obviously that you look after and you take a care. And as soon as you ask people to mentor somebody, they suddenly change. They suddenly go into, oh yeah, I've got to not talk about the work, It's not about progress chasing them, which is what most managers do. It's about saying, okay, what about you in this organization? What do you find difficult? And it's very illuminating when you ask people.
I want to go back to this whole notion about mentor being a slightly longer process and coaching being slightly shorter. It seems to me also that coaching is more specific to like an issue or particular skill set.
Yeah, because if you're bringing in somebody normally from outside, there's some scope of influence that you want to work on. So, for example, leadership behaviors, that's typical, something that you might want to coach. How can you get more out of your team? What motivates your team? What are the challenges of working in your team at the moment? So they're very specific. And actually the role of coaching is to ask questions. It's simply that. It's not to give any answers, because the answers are within you or the organization.
Okay, let's drill down into mentoring. So if I'm an SME and I want to implement mentoring within my company, what are the steps I should take?
Well, if you're the boss, you should say, I want to mentor 3 people over the next year.
Or the boss must be
Yes. It's all about, what the culture of the organization is leadership of the boss. So he or she should do that. And then he should say to his direct reports and the team, okay, guys, you should do the same. People need to lead by example. I think this is not an HR process, even though it is an HR process.
But do all people make good mentors? I mean, there's the assumption that just because I'm the CEO and I think it's a great idea, I should be the one doing the mentoring.
No, but that's a learning process yourself. I think that we all do things we're not particularly good at, and there's ways of developing a skill. But I think sending the signal that it's important means that the boss or the bosses need to do it. And they're more time challenged than anybody else. They're traveling, they're going around out to see clients or investors or whatever. But you've got to make the time, and it's, you're only talking about half an hour. Sitting down, having a tete-a-tete with somebody to talk about an issue that's important to them, hey, and it's great for the bosses because they have to learn to listen. And that's one of the challenges that bosses face.
Listening to you, I'm just thinking maybe even before I implement that, I must bring in a coach. Can I talk to all of us who are going to be in this mentoring program and just say, okay, here are some things, some skill sets that you want to work on while you are mentoring, or some of the things you want to think about?
Well, I think we can all benefit from the skills, because what you're trying to do ultimately is to change people's behavior. So you've got to be pretty grounded yourself. You've got to know why we're doing this and what we want to get out of it. And I think deliverable is very important to business and definitely to SMEs, because half an hour, 45 minutes away from the workplace, is loss in revenue in some people's mind. But actually it's all about engagement, and it's about asking people questions and listening to what they say. And sometimes you don't have an answer. And that's a good mentoring and a coaching session.
Well, in fact, that's one of the questions that came to mind is, okay, the CEO is doing it. Something has to give somewhere along the line. If I'm asking somebody else to do it, this person will be given an additional task on top of his or her regular tasks. So something has to give. There are only 8 hours in a day.
Well, I don't know about, if you work 8 hours a day, you're lucky. I think none of us are working 8 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
And, it's a bit like the old classic adage of, the man who chops down trees but never sharpens his axe. You sometimes have to stop, sharpen the tool you're using, get it more focused, refocus it, and then carry on using it. You know that if you keep chopping down trees with the same axe, it gets blunter and blunter and blunter, and it becomes harder to do the job. A freshness of approach can be really helpful. And don't forget, it benefits you as well as your mentee, the word you don't like to use. But it benefits both sides. Because for the first time, someone is giving you perhaps a different perspective on the organization that you thought everything was just hunky-dory.
Dr. Raymond Madden, CEO, Asian Institute of Finance. We've been talking about the efficacy of mentoring. Coming up, we'll drill into the activities during mentoring. This is Resource Center on Enterprise, BFM 89.9, the business station. This is Resource Center on Enterprise, and I'm Lim Soon Heng, speaking with Dr. Raymond Madden, CEO, Asian Institute of Finance. We retain by offering people training. We offer them opportunities to develop. We provide mentoring and we provide coaching. Now, you kind of mentioned that, the CEO should set the example, get people who report to him to be also to become mentors themselves. Like as I've said before, not all of us are geared for it. Never mind, we'll go ahead and do it nonetheless. What are some of the activities in the mentoring process that we going to be doing?
Well, I think it's important to set a goal. So what are we trying to achieve during this session? And it may be that,
Is it for each session of the mentoring or for the whole mentoring process?
Well, I think both. I mean, I think, this is not just a chat that's like a normal chat. It's a chat like a normal chat, but it has defined objectives. It's about asking what are people's views on certain issues, what are the changes they'd like to see made, what are the challenges they face. So they're very open-ended questions, because it's not like, are you happy in your work? Because then people will say yes. It's about getting people to talk about some of the issues that they're facing. And those may be very relevant issues. And I always get people to sort of go away, and when I come back for the next session, I say, okay, you've got some homework to do. Think about this particular issue that you identified. For example, I'm finding it really difficult getting traction from the marketing department. They never listen to the sort of stuff that I want to talk about. So then you say, okay, well, who's the most important person you need to influence in the marketing department? Okay, during the next week or month, go and make sure you have a meeting with them and discuss the challenges that you face. And often people come back and say, God, it was really helpful. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. So it's so simple, some of this, but it allows people a different lens on what they're doing, because we're all busy. We're all very focused on the day job, and we've all got dilemmas and deadlines and customers and phone calls and emails and whatever. And so this gives you just a simple thing to say, okay, I'm going to make a case in point to discuss something with another individual that actually I haven't had time to do. So some of it's really simple.
So who is driving the agenda in this mentoring process? Is the person who is mentored or the person who is mentoring?
No, the mentor drives the agenda, because you need to have an end goal of what you want out of this series of sessions. Okay? So we want better engaged employees. We want people who think out of the silo. We're looking for our leaders of the future. So who are the people that have got new ideas that we actually haven't managed to get voiced? Or who are the problem solvers? Or who are the go-to people? They're the sort of questions you're looking for. And then you say, actually, why don't you become a mentor of other people?
Okay, so for instance, let's say you are mentoring me and because you see some potential in what I'm doing. So when I'm sitting down with you for the very first time, what areas should we be working on?
Well, I'd be saying, the first question I'd say to you is, Sun Hing, so how do you find working at BFM? What are the challenges? What would you like to see change? As soon as you ask people that and give them the permission to talk about it, they suddenly open up and say, I'd like a bigger studio, or I'd like the air conditioning to be fixed. And some of those things are really easy to do. Mm-hmm. And when you get them fixed for those people and you say, okay, well, that's really easy to fix. I'm the same. I think it's not big enough or not warm enough or too cold. People think, wow, I'm having an impact. And that session was really productive. Now, I'm just giving very simple examples because I think simplicity is the art of this. But, some managers will say, my boss has given me really stretch sales targets this year. I don't know whether I'm really going to get to meet them. I'm going to fail. The bonus round for the guys in my team is going to suffer, if we don't deliver. He or she has said, we've got to deliver at all cost because we're in a very competitive market. Talking about those sort of issues are really helpful, and giving people pointers of some of the ways they could think differently about the type of questions they're facing.
In what ways then is a mentor like a sounding board?
They are a sounding board. Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody who really doesn't provide the answer, but maybe raises even more questions.
Well, I think they provide direction. I think they may provide some answers because they may say, okay, this is simple. Why don't you go and talk to X or Y? But actually giving people a direction of how they might solve the issue themselves is good for them, and it allows them to engage in the broader organization.
In the mentoring programs that you've been involved with, how long do they normally last?
Well, I always do internally within a mentoring approach, about 6 months. You give it plenty of time, you allow people to evolve because they're busy during the day job. And what's important is it's not just, a meeting and then a month later another meeting. People have got to be given a task to do during the space, because then they start thinking differently about the type of work. because it's not a moan session. It's not a, oh, I've got to moan. Now I've got to, by the third one, they've got a longer list of things they want to moan about, you know, and I'm also not happy with the IT department. I'm also not happy with the admin department. That's not the nature of this. This is about taking something and working it through. And sometimes it will take, if it's a complex problem, a number of months and involve a number of people.
So each time as the mentor is taking the person who's being mentored through the process, each meeting should have a kind of a way of solving a particular problem, innovating within the ambit of the mentored.
Yeah, in the second or third session, you say, okay, what have you learned in the first session and what have you done differently? So, people say, well, customers complain about our prices. Well, then you look at the whole of value proposition. What are you offering? A simple discount is not the way just to do basic business. It's about what other attributes can you offer people? What about speed to delivery? I mean, that's, if you can get delivery times down, that makes happy customers. They're prepared to pay more for that. So this is a way of thinking very differently. And that's why when I talk about coaching, I actually think it's good to bring in customers and suppliers, because actually they turn the table and they say, we love your company, we love what you do, but your delivery times are really out. We're chasing, it's really irritating, it's costly to my business. And sometimes those things are quite easy to fix.
Going back to this mentoring again, some companies suggest, or some people suggest that the person who's being mentored shadows the mentor. How useful is this?
Well, shadowing is something I think different. So this is sort of spending time with a senior person and watching them do their work. And that can be part of a mentoring process. But shadowing is essentially you sit through the meetings, that he or she explains to you the exact process they're going through. That's also very effective, but it's very time consuming. And then you find that there are certain times when you're dealing with either investors or you're dealing with salaries, you have to be excluded from the meetings for a variety of reasons. So that can be quite patchy. It's very powerful when it works, and it's very easy to do once you set it up. But it's more time consuming for both sides.
So shadowing means you're with this person like 8 hours a day.
Well, typically what you do is you do a morning or an afternoon. But I think what's important is that they sit in the meeting, they get introduced. This is Sun Hing. He's shadowing me today. He's from our other department in this. Very, very powerful. He or she listens, and the way at the end of the meeting, the person who's the boss who's shadowing says, "What did you observe? What did you think? How did I perform?" Even, I mean, hey, that would be a great question to ask people, and it's very engaging.
Reversing that, what about the mentor observing the mentored?
Well, I think it's not just sitting there and just writing notes. It's about having a dialogue afterwards and saying, what I liked was this. I don't know. Have we ever thought of offering the customer something else? And it's really about this whole thing is really about an open dialogue, because we get boxed in. We're doing a particular role, and this gives people sometimes the flexibility and the freedom just to ask a question. And questions is where you get innovation. That's my belief.
To summarize, Dr. Madden, what role can mentoring and coaching play in an organization?
Well, for me, it goes back to my 3 E's. It's empowering, it's definitely engaging, and it enriches the whole people experience within the organization, both from the coach, the mentee or the mentor, and it creates a culture of openness. And I think companies really benefit from that.
Employees are demanding greater transparency.
They want greater transparency, and they really want flatter structures. And hierarchies doesn't work, because you can command and can control for a short period of time, but actually flatter hierarchies are much more engaging.
Dr. Raymond Madden, CEO, Asian Institute of Finance. Next week, we'll be looking into the issue of succession planning for organizations.